On the front lines, the Pokrovsk direction remains one of the hottest spots. The Russian army is ramping up the pressure, trying to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses by bringing in reserves and changing tactics. This was reported by Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky. He emphasized that he continues to work in the Pokrovsk and Otrtana directions, where the enemy has tried to force the Ukrainian armed forces into intense combat. According to the Commander-in-Chief, the main task of the defense forces is to inflict maximum losses on the enemy and reduce its offensive potential.
We're paying special attention to strengthening our drone units, focusing primarily on the use of strike drones to target Russian occupiers, as well as developing logistics by incorporating robotic systems. The nature of war is changing, and so are our approaches to waging it. Scaling up modern technologies has a direct impact on the effectiveness of combat operations and helps save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, on Facebook.
Nearly half of all recorded Russian attacks along the entire front line were repelled by the defense forces at the Pokrovsk bridgehead. In addition, the Kostyantynivka direction remains just as intense. Ukrainian soldiers note that in these areas, FPV drone operators and artillerymen are working precisely against the enemy.
We're covering a very large area with Grad rockets. The enemy is taking significant losses.
Despite massive losses in manpower and equipment, the enemy continues to send Russian army soldiers into so-called meat assaults. Military experts note that Russian occupiers continue to base their offensive actions on two main concepts.
The first is, according to the illegally amended constitution of the Russian Federation, the seizure of 4 regions. That is precisely why the most fierce and intense combat operations are currently happening in the Donetsk region, while military activities have significantly intensified in Zaporizhia and also in the Kherson direction, considering the strategic advantage that the Dnipro River provides us there, especially with its high right bank. There are some isolated attempts near the Antonivsky Bridge, but nothing more than that. The second concept is the creation of so-called sanitary buffer zones in Kharkiv region, where they started this kind of activity, and now in Sumy region as well. They've also declared it for Chernihiv, but they don't have enough forces for all of this.
The clearing of Russians in Kupyansk, Kharkiv region is coming to an end. Special operations forces of the Ukrainian armed forces carried out a successful operation in the central part of the city. They reported that a group of Russian servicemen decided to set up positions in a destroyed supermarket and a nearby residential building. As a result of the clearing operation, some of the invaders were eliminated while others were taken prisoner.
For 3 months now, or even more, the Russians haven't been able to accomplish their first objective. The ammunition, specifically allocated for this month's breakthrough of the defenses, has been completely exhausted and depleted. Manpower has been lost, so they're throwing in second echelons to successfully complete the intended objective. They get drawn into the fight, and they also suffer significant losses in both personnel and vital resources here. This is exactly what is meant by the phrase systematically breaking down the overall offensive potential of the enemy.
According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, yesterday, Ukrainian soldiers destroyed 3 Russian tanks, 32 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launchers, 148 units of Russian vehicles and special equipment, and also shot down 917 operational tactical level UAVs. Also, on one section to the front line, soldiers discovered a Russian occupier in a protective cloak that looked a lot like a penguin. The soldiers reported that even such an outfit didn't help the enemy. The target was destroyed. In total, over the past day, Ukraine's defense forces eliminated another 1,020 Russian occupiers along the entire front line. Thus, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the total combat losses of the Russian army in Ukraine have already exceeded 1,235,000 soldiers.
Joining our broadcast now is Vyacheslav Potapenko, Deputy Director of the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Vyacheslav, good morning. We're glad to welcome you live on Freedom TV channel.
Good morning.
This is truly an exceptional and outstanding result that has been achieved here, and it's quite remarkable how every single detail has been handled with such incredible precision and care, making it absolutely perfect beyond any shadow of a doubt. Good morning to you on this lovely day. I truly hope that you are having a wonderful start to your morning and that everything is going well for you so far. There are 3 parties involved in these trilateral negotiations. In your opinion, given the current situation, what should we be prepared for? What tactics do you think the Kremlin gang will use to drag out this process as much as possible and undermine all efforts to bring peace, whether from Ukraine, the United States, or European countries?
I believe that. At this current moment in time, the official Russian position is as follows. They are demanding full and complete control over the entire territorial extent of the Donetsk region. That is to say, this whole area, including the strategic cities of Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, Drushkivka, and Kostyantynivka. And they are currently maintaining an extremely rigid and uncompromising stance regarding this specific demand. They are holding this position quite firmly, and as far as I understand, they don't want to budge from it. And that's basically what's causing the main problems in organizing the negotiation process. But this has been the case, well, at least since the beginning of last year. So it's already been a year. So in this specific case, absolutely nothing fundamentally new or groundbreaking is being proposed at this time. There are some alternative options that have been presented to us in the form of various opinions, like the idea of free economic zones, demilitarized zones, or the potential transferring of a specific portion of the territory under the control not of Russian, but of some entirely different international forces. And different versions keep multiplying, but as far as I understand, the Russian Federation does not agree to these conditions. And fundamentally and essentially, this complex and multifaceted question, at least in the public sphere, in terms of what's being discussed, functions significantly as a major public stumbling block. But I'm convinced there are still many other issues being discussed, on which it's difficult to reach mutual understanding.
To compel Trump to abandon this peacekeeping process. In your opinion, how likely is such a scenario? Can Trump really afford to do that after ending so many wars and then just drop out of the race like that?
Well, if you'd asked me last summer, it seemed to me that at that stage it was possible. For Trump, it was possible to walk away. At that time, the wording was used like this. Something like, I tried, it didn't work out for me, you guys figure it out however you want. However, at this moment, it appears increasingly evident to me that the Trump administration can no longer simply walk away from this critical issue for a wide range of strategic reasons. There's cooperation with China, with the European Union, and one way or another, the US has ended up in. And now there's a new administration. It's already been in place for almost a year. And you can't really say anymore that everything that happened before was just Biden's problems. That doesn't work now. And accordingly, this has now become a problem for the Trump administration as well. When we consider the ongoing situation regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict, so I think it is unlikely that he will be in a position to.
He might simply choose to wash his hands of the entire situation and decide to distance himself from the matter, eventually stating that this issue is something that truly does not concern us at all, effectively removing any responsibility we might have had to intervene or help. Long-term military actions. But the question arises, who and when will use it? It's pressure. We literally only very recently engaged in a discussion that a significant number of analysts believed that right around the time of the inauguration, During President Trump's second term, he would definitely put pressure on the Russian Federation to show real results from his peacekeeping efforts. But that never happened. What will happen this time? After all, it's absolutely clear that the Kremlin is basically wiping its feet on official Washington by attacking Ukraine yet again, on the day of negotiations and so on. And there will be more than enough of such tricks. Moreover, they will most likely be as bloody as possible.
Well, without a doubt, the Russian Federation is putting pressure on the negotiation process, including by shelling Ukraine's critical and energy infrastructure. As for the Trump administration, well, I would say that they are pursuing a fairly flexible policy. That is, on the one hand, it's really easier for them to put pressure on Ukraine than on Russia. On the other hand, if you look at what has been done over the past year, they have actually managed to take control of the South Caucasus, pushing the Russian Federation out of the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. Sanctions were imposed on Lukoil and other oil companies, which were quite painful for Russia when already the Russian. So to speak, the right hand. The radical opposition began to say that Russia can no longer continue the war without suffering economic losses. And now Venezuela, Russia and China's main partner. Across the vast coastal regions of Latin America, the United States military has begun the process of intercepting and inspecting large oil tankers, and now both the United Kingdom and the Republic of France have officially joined these maritime efforts. The transit of Russian gas through Ukraine will be stopped in 2025. To put it in another way, when looking at the actual situation on the ground, the Russian fleet has been effectively forced out and displaced from Crimea and has lost virtually all of its strategic operational significance. Strategically, in the Black Sea, it's basically hiding in ports in the North Caucasus. Essential and critical communication channels and networks for unauthorized gray market exports have been effectively halted and severely disrupted across all international borders. Oil, including physical terminals, has been destroyed by Ukrainian means, long-range drones, and so on. So the immense pressure is definitely there and continues to mount. The critical question we face is that the Russian Federation currently has quite serious and consistent support coming from Iran, from North Korea, and also from several other strategic partners across the globe. Countries of the global south, China, India, and others, are actively profiting from this war, acting as intermediaries and supplying the Russian Federation while simultaneously buying oil. I wouldn't say that Russia is negatively impacting the United States. But on the other hand, the US is not ready to throw all its resources into this confrontation with the Russian Federation. And if you read their new strategic documents, their national security strategy, and this newly developed national defense and military strategy, they don't see Russia as the primary existential threat. They view it as a local regional threat that they can effectively manage and control, largely through their European partners. So, in this sense, simply put, the policy the U.S. is pursuing is beneficial for the U.S. It's economically advantageous for them, but it creates a lot of problems for Ukraine. Without the level of American support that was there, say, in 2022 to 2023, things are, well, not easy for Ukraine. So there's definitely a significant and intricate level of complexity here. But that doesn't mean that the U.S. is directly. They have substantial and deep-seated geopolitical problems with the Russian Federation. If anything, it's entirely and fundamentally the opposite case.